This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at thebatmanuniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
You don't like the
the BatmanUniverse.net, your home for all things Batman and, of course, Robin. We are part of the Batman Universe Podcasting Network, so go check out TBU's brand new site at BatmanUniverse.net. Speaking of podcast networks, we're also associated with Batman on Films Podcast Network at BatmanPodcastNetwork.com. You can get a hold of us on all the social media outlets. We are on Facebook at Facebook.com/EveryoneLovesTheDrake. We are on Twitter at ELTD Podcast. We have an Instagram page. You can email into the show at RobinELTD Podcast. We have a YouTube page, which Terence is helming that page with me from time to time. So you can check out all of the new Robin information. And at the time of this recording, well, not the time of this recording, the time that you're hearing this, Terence, I think, has just finished up a Robin Eternal from a future state, which I'm a little far behind on, so I'm eagerly waiting to listen to that, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about it a little bit on this show, but go check out Terence running the YouTube version of this podcast. So, I just mentioned Terence's name. This is a continuation from episode 128 with our guest, Michael Bailey. And I'm not going to do a huge, long intro here. The show is already clocking in at about an hour and 8 minutes. We're going to take a quick little promo break for our guest, Michael Bailey. When we come back, we'll hear the synopsis for Robin 32, and we'll continue our discussion for Batman Legacy Part 3.
Hello, this is the Irredeemable Shag from the Fire and Water Podcast Network, and you're listening to Robin.
On the second episode of the month, we'll dig into the various adventure comics.
that were based on the Fox Kids / Kids WB Batman animated shows because they're really good and hardly anyone seems to remember that they exist.
The show can be found at the Fortress of Baileytude Podcasting Network, which is located at www.fortressofbaileytude.com.
The Overlooked Dark Knight, the non-index show.
Shining a bat signal on the bat stories that no one seems to remember or care about.
Because somebody has to.
'97, and the newest trade paperback that came out in 2018. The cover goes to the late, great Mike Rowingo, and the inker is Terry Austin. And for the expedience of time, as always, with the Batman Legacy part of the show, I'm going to use DC Fandom Wikia page for the synopsis to help speed us along a little bit. And this is a rather short one, but we'll make up for it in our discussion portion. In Paris, Robin and Nightwing track down the agents of Ra's al Ghul who plan to release the deadly Ebola A Gulf virus there. Batman advises Robin to seek out the assistance of Henry Ducard, and in time the location for the release is tracked down to the Ballure. After a violent confrontation with Al Ghul's followers, the virus is found and prevented from being released. Robin and Nightwing then head back to Gotham City on Batman's orders. All right, let's go to Robin 32, and I could tell you right off the bat, this is poster worthy. This would be on my wall right away. Staz Johnson, we are now a few issues into his era, and we have something special for Staz Johnson coming up that is now a year, or almost technically 2 years old now, but we'll get there eventually. So what did you guys think of the cover for Robin 32? Let's start with our guest, Michael Bailey.
Oh, it's Mike Rowingo drawing Robin. I mean,
yes.
like that's the sentence. There, if you know that it's nothing but perfection, and it is really. I think what's really cool is kind of the perspective of this, is that you could just focus on Robin's image, but the fact that he's kind of repelling from the Eiffel Tower with the dark clouds above him, it's just beautiful. God, Ringo drew this costume. Not as good as Tom Grummett, but close.
Yeah, if you can't have Tom Grummett, Ringo definitely. Ryan.
Yeah, it is great. It's got a great use of perspective and form and fluidity. Yes, like
nice,
just the way he's swinging from the tower with the. You see the costume, and the costume is colored great. Like the belt and the R, it's got that chrome look to it too. So yeah, I mean it's. And there's even, some bats in the background. It's definitely something you could grab and be on a poster or a calendar or something and still hold up, outside of a, standalone issue of Robin. It's really nice.
Terrence.
Yeah, A+, poster worthy all the way. It's one of those covers that the more you look at it, the more you notice like little details, and the perspective of the Eiffel Tower is amazing. A+. And you know what struck me too is you see like, oh, it's Ringo, so he's amazing, but then you don't see his name on the cover. You see it's Johnson. But when I turned the page and I saw that first splash page and Robin is kind of like upside down being shot at, I was like, well, this is just as good. Like this holds up. This looks really good. Then we got to Nightwing's hair and I freaked out and dropped the book.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. But cover A+. Yeah.
So, yeah, this is really cool. And Dixon does a really good job at this. Sometimes, like in TV shows, you start out, like, of course, right in the middle of action, then you've got to have the Zach Morris of, like, oh, let me tell you how I got into the situation. I think that it doesn't work all the time for a lot of characters, but for Robin, your Spider-Mans, those type of younger characters to go, how did Robin get in this predicament? And you kind of follow him leaping through this museum or wherever he's at, and you get his inner monologue that is going on, and then you start going back to, here's the events that were happening. I think Dixon.
That's a trope. That's a trope that he's done plenty of times in this Robin series too. So it's what's cool about this issue is that it is like by the time you're reading this, and if you're just reading it in one chunk in one sitting, it is a cool this is something that kind of comics do really well, where you're reading a crossover story, but instead of it being told completely in one shot, the perspective switches, just because now we're reading Catwoman, now you're reading Robin or whatever, and now it's now we're picking up on the story, but it's instead of being told on this omniscient narrator point of view, now we're at Robin's point of view. So that's cool, and those introductory pages, the way that Dixon usually does them, is always a really good mind reset, frame of reference of where are we with this? How is this setting back up? And like Michael was saying earlier, it's got the action, and that action is always it's fun, but it always has the inner monologue on it too. So you're usually always pulling double duty, where you've got the action and the splash pages and that stuff, but all of the dialogue catches you up to speed, and it's told then it enhances the character. You get really into who is this character? What's his personality? Really quickly. So
we know Tim Drake likes third base, but apparently he also likes Green Day, which I thought that was kind of funny. And the typical hey, I'm wearing a Green Day shirt, I've got a red jacket on, it looks like he has an 8-ball jacket that serves as the R of can we get on more of the nose that hey, this is Robin, in case you're not reading.
You gotta put in the Seinfeld 8-ball.
Yeah. You got a question? You ask the 8-ball. All signs point to yes.
Yeah, and Green Day holds up a lot better than third base these days. And there's another part, too. I noticed he mentioned that he'd trade his CD collection. Very rarely does something sound dated in it. But what I thought was kind of funny is that if instead of CD collection, if it had been a little earlier and said his vinyl record collection, it would have come back around because people now collect those again. Yeah.
And I got to tell you, since Christmas, I have bought 8 vinyl albums that I thought I haven't bought a 33 in ages, and I've bought 8 since December 25th.
Yeah, vinyl outsells CDs now. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask our Superman expert, and shame that I don't know this. Has Staz Johnson drawn Superman with long hair?
I think he has. That sounds familiar. We're hip deep in the long hair era over on From Crisis to Crisis. And did he draw an annual or something like that? Because it seems like it'd be a good fit, because wow, Nightwing has a lot of product in his hair.
Yeah, and he looks like, if you were to cover up his long hair, that looks like Superman. I know it's kind of hard to draw a lot of distinguishable faces depending on who the artist is, but rereading this for the podcast, for a brief moment, I was like, is Clark Kent on this plane with Tim Drake for a moment? One question I wanted to throw out to you guys, with Nightwing being on here, and he's, kind of healing from his injuries. I like that Dixon doesn't write Nightwing as he's still writing Nightwing as the brotherly figure, and lets Tim, kind of lets is a loose word, but lets Tim jump out of the car to go to the next event, and it's not like Nightwing is berating him, because this is Tim's own book. But,
no, his training wheels are off, at this point. Yeah.
So, what do you guys think of the relationship of Nightwing and Dick? Nightwing and Dick, jeez. Tim and Dick, not only just through this...
Dick and Grayson?
Dick and Grayson, yeah. But a chum. So, not only just through this book, but through the 90s as a whole. Let's start with Michael on this one.
I always had the feeling as a reader that Dick took a personal interest in Tim's training and him being Robin, because he doesn't feel responsible for what happened to Jason. but I'm sure in the back of his mind, he's like, if I was there, maybe I could have headed this off. And the fact that Bruce came to Dick and said, I want you to help train this guy. Tim was always the vindication for what happened to Jason. Like, this time we're going to get it right. We're not going to rush into it. We're not going to just choose the next kid that, steals the hubcaps off the Batmobile. The fact that he puts it on Bob Black's, how do you even do that to the Batmobile? But anyways, so I always liked their relationship because it was like big brother, little brother. They're the ones that know what it's like to work with Bruce on a nightly basis. And Batman in the 90s became a jerk. Like a huge jerk. Like, on his own,
he a-hole Batman. That's what we call it.
But when he was like if you read, like, especially heading up towards No Man's Land, it's like, we're all soldiers. It's like, Bruce, come on, jeez, God, I know you like organizational. You have like the strong organizational skill that you want to, breed into your, your vigilantism. But we're all doing this as volunteers. It's not like you're paying us, though you are paying for everything else. No, I love Dick and Tim during this era. I just love their dynamic, and I love in this issue specifically. Tim just bails on him. He's just like, "No, you're going to go handle this. I'm going to go take care of this." And you need to heal up anyways. And it's just like, oh, the tables have turned.
Terrence.
Like right before I reread this, I was listening to your podcast you did with Stella, and you talked a lot about Damian Wayne and the Robins, and she said that that's her favorite Robin. So I was thinking a lot about how almost equal Tim and Dick are. Not quite, but it's big brother, little brother. They're not that far off. And why that whole Grant Morrison, when Dick Grayson becomes Batman and Damian Wayne is Robin, it wouldn't have worked if it was Tim. It just would have been such a different dynamic. It would have been prodigal. And so, like, Tim Drake fans need to just, like, take a chill pill on that, because it wasn't going to work with Tim. So that's why Tim had to go be Red Robin, and Damian had to be Robin, to get that dynamic of the petulant little snot who's just learning the ropes, and Dick trying to rein him in. Yeah, I did think it was kind of funny how Tim just jumps out the window of the car and just like, see you later, go rest up, I got this. I also thought it was kind of funny. I know you're leading into this. He just in a city as huge as Paris, with I don't know how many millions of people it had back in 1998. He bumps right into the one person he knows in Paris. That was pretty hilarious.
That's how it always happens, though. I mean, very anecdotally, I've had things happen like that to me too, where I'll be like, I'm in a completely different town, completely different state. I'm like, gosh, I hope nobody recognizes me here. Well, that's ridiculous. And then somebody was like, why would anybody be here that knows you? I don't know. And then, like, literally 5 seconds later, hey Ryan, blah, blah, it's happened to me before, and it is a weird feeling when it happens.
My grandmother tells the story all the time that my grandpa and grandma, she had been wanting to see the Grand Canyon for forever. So they go out to see the Grand Canyon. My grandfather was a high school teacher for like VOAG, working on cars and all that stuff. So they're out in the middle looking at Grand Canyon, and my grandmother says, it's so nice to be somewhere where we don't know anybody. And not more than 2 seconds later, they hear, Mr. Myers, is that you? My grandmother's like, I come to see the biggest hole in the universe, and we got to run into somebody that we know. So, yeah, it happened. So I put out a tweet a few weeks ago about, hey, we're getting ready to start up Legacy, and who tweets but our guest, Michael Bailey, and says, you said there was a moment that was a Tim Drake moment. Is this the moment you were talking about, sir?
Oh, yeah, this is one of the top 5 best Tim Drake moments of all time. This guy was such a jerk back in the Robin miniseries, and the fact that Tim plants him, like, in 3 panels is just so satisfying to see. He's just like, Tim's just like, I really don't have time for you and your shenanigans. And he pushes the point. And I'm trying to, like, if I'm going to be critical, that last kick really doesn't work. I'm trying to figure out how he did it.
Yeah.
Was it like a spin kick? I mean, Because there's no way he gets from holding that dude's leg with his left arm to kicking him with his left leg unless he spins around. I'm no expert, but that just doesn't scan. But he just blocks the kick, shoves his palm in this dude's face, and then kicks him to the floor, and he just walks off. He's just done. and the fact that one of those guys is wearing one of those mesh shirts.
He's like a pirate. He's like a pirate. It's amazing. Is that like? I wonder if like did they open up like a Paris fashion magazine in the 90s, and like that's what people were like. One dude was wearing, and they were like, "We got to capture this," you know.
I'm not one to talk about 90s fashion because I pretty much spent most of the decade wearing blue jeans, T-shirts, and denim button-downs. So I really have no room to talk, but I never wore a mesh shirt.
No.
And I think that puts me, on the up on this. But no, I remember reading this back in 1996 and going, yeah! And everyone in the comic shop's like, what are you talking about? I go, look what he did! And they're like, so? I'm like, do you guys ever read the first miniseries? And I explain everything, and it's like I'm speaking another language for some reason.
I got a My Cousin Vinnie moment out of this, where the guy wants to beat up Vinnie.
Yeah.
And just, how do I know this isn't a roll of dollars?
Hey, little Yankee boy, look here what I got.
What is it?
$200.
Bring it here, let me see it. How do I know that's not a bunch of ones with a 20 wrapped around it?
It's $200.
Fan it out, show it to me. Yeah, right.
Hey, little Yankee wuss! Look here. I got you $200. You gonna kick the shit out of me now?
Hey, I had a friend. No, literally, it wasn't me. It was literally a friend who wore one of those mesh shirts to the beach and then fell asleep, and like the pattern was on him from being sunburned.
Oh my gosh, the sunburn pattern. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was not me, though. It really was a friend, but yeah.
They called him Chain Link after that. He never got over it.
Chain Link.
Man, if I only knew. Can we rewind 35 years to middle school so I could call him that? Yeah.
Nice.
I'm going to find where he is, call him up. He's like, Chain Link.
What's up, Chain Link?
That? Yeah.
But it is, like, I agree, like, and it's a cool moment, and it's something that you only really get with Chuck Dixon. Chuck Dixon probably is the only person that would be like, hey, I've got this story, and they're in Paris, and I've got my little Dixon verse over here, and I know that I wrote this other story where he was in Paris and encountered these characters, so I am totally going to, like, make room here to have him run into this guy so I can have, some sort of full circle moment. Like, it's great. Like,
and it's a vindicating moment going clear back to, all the books that we have been following Tim Drake through, to where Tim was such a novice in that mini series and kind of getting his butt handed to him, ironically going up against, King Snake by the end of that Tim now comes back to the city where he was first learning from and gets to just own the day to, like, the high school bully essentially that was giving him such a hard time that he can just take him out in one fell swoop and be done. Like Michael said, as a Tim Drake fan, you're like, yes, that was friggin' awesome.
You go back to your My Cousin Vinnie thing, though. They got similar hairstyles in this issue.
They do.
Yeah. I'm seeing it.
So I want to kind of advance a little bit, not go through totally page by page. Ducard. Now, at least chronologically, as far as we've been going through the podcast, Ducard, I believe, has not made any appearances on our show. So this was something aside from, Batman Begins or other, other forms of media. I don't know if I've personally come across reading something where Ducard has actually been in the book other than, Batman talking about it or another character.
Didn't Tomasi use him in something?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the 90s and this,
I see.
In this time frame goes. So, what did you think of Robin's interaction with Ducard? And he does come to save the day by the end of the book. So, what are your thoughts on Ducard? Let's start with our guest, Michael Bailey.
I liked seeing Tim interact with him because Ducard was one of those characters to me that was. I'm not a huge fan of the 3-part series story where he first appeared. Blind Justice, I think it was called. If I
yes.
remember
Yeah.
correctly. And because I just don't like that story. I remember reading it again when I was going through the whole run and going, this is kind of boring. like what is actually going on? This is the guy that wrote the movie? I mean, but...
Was that in Detective Comics like 600? Was that like the big 600?
Yeah,
okay,
598 to 600.
I think it... Yeah.
So, but seeing Tim interact with him, it's always kind of cool to me for Batman to kind of send his proteges to deal with the people that he's dealt with. Because there's history there. And even if you haven't read anything with Henry Ducard or Henri Ducard, if you want to, or if you want to call him Liam Neeson, you can do that too. Because Henry Ducard has a very special set of skills. Skills that make him nightmare for people like Robin. Even if you hadn't read any of that, Dixon does such a great job of making you think this is important that it's important.
Yeah. Ryan.
Yeah, I think Michael summed it up really well there, and that's actually a good hallmark, I think, of maybe sequential storytelling in general, but also something that Dixon's really good at. Yeah, it was a cool surprise to see Ducard here. I mean, this is the first time I've really reread Legacy since my original reading years and years ago, and when I first read it, I didn't know the importance of Ducard, and since then, we've had things like Batman Begins and things, and so, not that the character is the same or whatever, but just that prestige or pedigree of, like, the meaning of that character, and then when he showed up here, I was like, oh, wow, Ducard, that's kind of cool, and, yeah, because he's kind of like a centerpiece character, and I don't think he comes back again either, but it's cool that, again, when you're in a different location like that, Dixon probably, he's good on Legacy, in more ways than one, because he would bring back other Legacy characters like your Shotgun Smiths and stuff like that from other places. So he probably was like, okay, well here he's in Paris. Who do I have in Paris that I can play with that I've seen before? Here's the guy from the miniseries. Oh, we've got Ducard. I can bring him in. Or maybe it was even an editorial decision. Maybe Denny was like, hey, we've got Ducard, you got to use him, and so, like, who knows, right?
Wow. That's dead on, sir. Congratulations.
Talk to the guy for 3 hours, you'll pick up on his on speech pattern. So, but plug. But yeah, there you go. So like it could have been an editorial thing too, or maybe just something. I don't think Denny would have forced it, but maybe it was a suggestion of like, oh yeah, we've got these things in the toolbox, and so anything that helps challenge and maybe even reaffirm Tim Drake and his philosophy as Robin is cool, and it's a cool thing just to add into a story, into a scene. It's one of those things that like works on a single issue level, but it also gets to move the storyline of Legacy along at the same time. So I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think this was the first time they saw each other since the end of that miniseries.
I believe you're right, yeah. Terence.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you guys this too when Batman's like, hey, there's someone, we got this deadly virus that's going to kill the whole world. There's someone I need you to talk to. Well, like, is it Superman? Is it Flash? Is it one of the other Justice Leaguers who might be looking?
Now, Denny, we know Denny would not have allowed that.
Right.
Remember?
Yeah.
Like, go back to our Dixon interview where he was like, I don't want to see a cape.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but my point that I was going to make is when I read this originally back when it came out, like, it never would have crossed my mind that Batman Batman would go to the Justice League for help or anything like that, because Batman and that whole Batman universe was so self-contained. Now that there's been so much of Batman in the Justice League and New 52 and the DCEU and all that stuff, it did kind of strike me as like, why aren't they calling their friends for help here a little bit? But I also understand it is a comic book and this is the reality of the situation. But they don't even try to like put in some kind of like bogus of like, well, we can't contact the Justice League because Ra's is monitoring blah, 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 you know, or just something for it. They're just like, it's not even brought up. But what I really liked about it was how Robin, Tim, like uses his, you know, intelligence to reason with him, where, you know, Ducat is just like, you know, I don't have the exact quote here, but something of like, yeah, why should I care? I'm not getting paid for this. And it's kind of like, well, do you care if you live? Kind of, you know, like, cause you're going to be bleeding blood out of your eyes, and how he can motivate, you know, Ducat to kind of try to help him, you know, not through a threat, not through paying him, but using, you know, his intelligence to think of a way that would motivate Ducat to get in the game, so to speak. So I thought that was a really cool aspect of Tim's character.
Yeah, before we close out on this book, I do want to take a look at some of Staz Johnson's artwork. So I think I don't remember Staz. I think I'm remembering the latter part. I'm looking at, you know, a page on my wall here from Johnson. It looks, you know, very clean lines. Page 20, his use of the panel layout when Robin is bouncing off of whatever the sculpture is before he knocks it over. Just the little inserts of Robin bouncing off, rolling, tucking, running up the side of the panel. You can kind of get into this forever loop. I thought that was a really good use of the panel layout to have him knock this over. What did you guys think of Johnson's art through this book, and any final thoughts on this issue before we get to our final book for this evening? Let's start with Ryan.
I thought it was... I liked it. You know, it's... Although I didn't really remember Ducard in the story, if you would have told me to think about Legacy beforehand, this is probably the issue that I would have mentally gone to first, is like the globetrotting... Well, other than the Ra's al Ghul Bane reveal, but like in the terms of the globetrotting story stuff, having them in Paris and stuff stands out quite a bit. It's just kind of a cool little entry, and I like how the way the story is constructed catches back up with itself. That would be my last little point here. Is like where the first thing you see on the first page of this Robin issue with him hanging upside down, that it gets caught. You catch back up to that, and you know exactly that's the moment you caught back up to, because they redraw he redraws the panel in a smaller panel on the page, and so like you're like, oh, okay, I'm back to the present day. We're caught up now, and I thought that was cool. I always like it when they're able to do that with the stories, and so and just in general. Also, man, there's a lot that happens in this issue from a story construction standpoint. But yeah, just seeing Robin and Nightwing working together and fighting together, you know, is cool.
Yeah. And one last little thing before we go to our other two, that this is kind of the first book out of the ones we've been talking about where the virus is being mentioned by Tim in the concluding couple panels, that kind of not forgotten about it, but it's not really brought up.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did too. Yeah, when I was reading this tonight, and I think that's a point, because like I've been reading it all the way through, but I only started picking up, basically I started volume 2 for this show, and so by the time you get to that point, you're like, oh yeah, it reminded me, yeah, Tim has the virus. It's been a driving force in the story for the last couple of issues, but that's probably just because, you know, it's not something that Catwoman would really touch on too much, and then the very next issue is this Robin issue, so that's when they would bring it back up again. But it does feel like a gap of like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Right. Michael.
I love Staz Johnson's art. I think between his work here and the issues of Detective that he did, he had such a super clean style. Still very much of its era, but it translates into, like, in rereading it, you're not totally, like, reminded that you're reading a book from the 90s.
No, not at all.
But as, you know, when you go, you have two very hard acts to follow on this title. You know, when you start your title with Tom Grummett, and then you go to Mike Rowingo, it's just like, you better bring your A game to the art that you're doing, because you know, you got to stand on the shoulder to shoulder with the Giants, and I think he did it. I think he did a fantastic job.
And I'd be lying if I said that Staz Johnson wasn't one of, you've got Grummet and Lyle drawing Robin very well. And as much as I love Rowingo, by the time Johnson leaves this book, I really wanted more of Staz Johnson. So I think in this first early issues, I was kind of like, I don't know if I like his art. And by the end, when he was off the book, I was like, oh, I've been robbed. I want Staz Johnson. So I've always had a soft spot for Staz Johnson. But yeah, sorry didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, that was basically all I had to say. This was one of... I've been reading a lot of books from this era, or rereading, because I, just to follow along with the books we do on From Crisis to Crisis, I'm trying to get a sense of some of the other things in the DC universe. And it's funny, the books that I read back then, or have read previously, that I've fallen off the wagon of. And this is the one where I was like, no, I'm sticking with this. And so it's just it's so nice to be able to revisit an issue like this and love it as much as I did the first time I read it.
And Terence.
So how do I say this without using the word fluidity? But
it's a prerequisite of the show, sir.
Yeah, the thing I love about Staz Johnson's art is you can feel and see the motion of the characters. Like on page 17, you can see Nightwing like throwing this batarang down into the hole where the guys are shooting at them. On page, 15, you can see Dick and Tim swinging in from the sky, and
that's a good shot.
Nightwing landing on the car. 16, you can just feel that soldier and see him falling down into the pit, and Tim kicking a guy up there. And 19, you can see Tim just leaping off that balcony there. So he uses the lines and the movement really well. The action's flowing, as opposed to a lot of other artists, especially at this time where everything's a pose. Like, I think of Rob Liefeld.
I was going to say Rob Liefeld, exactly. Yeah. It's a pose that may or may not be physically even possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, you have no idea how the arm got there, or the leg, or who's kicking or punching. Everybody's posed so that the penciling will, he can then go sell that at a convention because it's got every character in it. So, but Staz Johnson, I just feel like does the movement. Everything flows really well, that fluidity. The other thing that I was going to say, just in general for the book, I'm really glad that from going from this great artist Rowingo, but he was very stylized. The big impulse feet. It was almost kind of cartoony, almost kind of manga. They could have gone even further in that direction, but they kind of dialed it back to a little more realistic, a little more, a traditional comic book artist and feel. And I'm glad they did that instead of like pushing, getting a Rowingo clone who was even more so. So yeah, I would definitely, the artwork is incredibly enjoyable and solid throughout the issue. And Nightwing's hair that's poster worthy. Yeah.
Yeah. His hair is his own grapnel line, if you will.
Oh my, yeah, he could just like whip it around and he's like the black-haired Fabio, basically. That's got to be like the art direction here. Make him a black-haired Fabio.
No, the funny thing about Nightwing in this issue is that, if you read the dialogue, it's just like, then there's Nightwing. He just exudes attitude. And he's
I love that.
I'm like, he's not grunting because he's trying to scare these guys. He's grunting because his ribs are broken. He is in massive amounts of pain. And he landed wrong. But all the other guys are just like, oh, God, this guy's scary. He's like,
he's got the dude.
Oh, man. I have a reoccurring rib injury that'll pop up, at least once a year. And, I don't want to do anything. So I don't understand these comics where they're like, I have 3 busted ribs and I'm going to go save the city. It's just like, no, I'm going to lay here and try not to breathe.
Right. Can you bring me back a sandwich, please? Well, let's go to our final book for this evening. Legacy Part 4, Batman Shadow of the Bat 54. All right, like the last issue for Robin, this one for Batman Shadow of the Bat number 54. The information comes to us by Mike's Amazing World again. The cover date is September 1996 with an on sale date of July 3rd, 1996 with a cover price of $1.95. The editor is the great Dennis J. O'Neil. The writer is Alan Grant, the penciler is Dave Taylor, the inker is Stan Woosh, the letterer is Bill Oakley, and the colorist is Pamela Rambeau. Again, this has been reprinted in Batman Legacy trade paperback that came out in 1997, and the newest one that came out in Batman Legacy Volume 2 trade paperback 2018, and the cover goes to Carl Critchlow. And again, like the other one, I'm going to take the synopsis from DC Wiki of Fandom, again for the expedience of time. A novel synopsis for Batman Shalabat number 54. Bruce Wayne attends an art exhibit in Edinburgh. He is interested in some of the artifacts that were recently shipped there from the Sudan. Bruce knows that if there was any way for Ra's al Ghul to smuggle in the virus into the city, it would be as a part of this exhibit. Bruce returns later that night as Batman to look over the art pieces. He sees three men disguised entering into the museum, into the vault where the pieces of the art are. He attacks them, but then realizes they are not part of Ra's men. The three men are taking back pieces of art that belong to them by right. They plan to take it and pay back what they were paid the pieces for. Suddenly, the League of Assassins arrive and attack all of them. Batman and the three men fight back, but two of the assassins escape with flasks containing the virus. Batman tells the three brothers to follow one of them while he follows the other. The brothers track down a man until the assassin escapes using a motorcycle. Batman manages to catch the second assassin and takes the flask from him. When he asks the assassin where his partner will be, the assassin breaks a gas capsule in his mouth and dies instantly. With the help of the three brothers and their van, Batman manages to find the place where the assassins were headed. He manages to track the motorcycle, and before he can reach the assassin, the man kills himself in the same manner as his partner. The flask is falling to the ground, and Batman lunges forward to catch it. He grabs it but falls into a lake that prevents the flask from being crushed and saves Batman from certain death. The three brothers ask Batman to help retrieve their valuable piece in exchange for the help they provided. Batman agrees and then heads to the hotel room where he contacts Robin. Robin tells Batman that a fourth city might be Ra's next target. Batman decides to act immediately, and he is ready and sets out to go to Calcutta. So we've got Alan Grant and Taylor on this book, and I dig this cover. I don't know why. I don't know if it's just the big monolith tombstone of Batman's symbol and Batman in the background. I don't know if it's just the color, the muted colors of it. I wouldn't say it's poster worthy or anything like that, but there's just something about this cover I've always kind of liked, and I really can't put my finger on it. So that's all I have to say about that, as Michael would say. So what did you guys think of the cover for 54 in our final book for this evening? Let's start with Terence.
Yeah, Shadow of the Bat always had this tradition of having sort of a painted cover,
yeah,
or a cover done by an artist who wasn't the artist in the book. So, yeah, I agree with you, Rob. I like the colors. I like the painted. I always liked artwork of Batman where his arms and legs kind of disappear into like a sea of black. So he's kind of a shadow, and it's not too defined, which is how it is in this cover.
Like Terence, like a shadow of the bat.
Oh yeah, there you go. Perfect.
He said the name of the show.
Yeah,
yeah, that's why it's funny.
Ryan.
Well, to me, the painterly thing is what jumped out to me, because I looked at it and I'm like, instantly thought like, this could be like a 90s Magic card if they had like a Magic the Gathering Batman set, which in my opinion is an amazing compliment. Yeah, it's really neat. I mean, it's not exactly what happens in the issue, but it's close enough, and it's definitely makes you want to be like, well, what is this? And yeah, it's definitely, because it's not the traditional jump at you comic book cover, it does have a different vibe to it immediately, which is reflective of the story within, I would say.
Yeah. Michael.
I'm kind of like with you guys, though. To me, it looks like a Mignola pastiche as well, and that Batman monument kind of reminds me in a weird way, and maybe it's because I read it last year for one of the other shows I do. It reminds me of like the monument that Deacon Blackfire had as like the he would hit people up with acid and make them look at this monument, and it would be like this huge imposing thing, and it really wasn't. I don't know why my head went there, but that's where it went. But yeah, like you guys said, Shadow of the Bat was always the arty Batman book. It was like the Batman book that's like a half step away from Vertigo.
Well, it's basically was created to give Grant and Breyfogle a space to kind of do their own cerebral focused Batman stories, right? Where Grant could do his thing. Is it that initially?
Yeah,
why
it was basically, the time is right, y'all. There's a Batman movie coming out. Let's launch a new title and let's give it to Breyfogle. This will be, the McFarlane Spider-Man for Batman, but with a writer-artist team, and not a guy who couldn't write, to save his life.
Yeah, let's get into the interior of the book. And the interior of artist, the cover credits go to, I'm going to butcher this name, Carl Critchlow, if I'm saying that last name probably wrong, but that's our cover credit to it. And David Taylor is doing the interior of this book. So I think Ryan hit the nail on the head. This is your Magic the Gathering issue. And a little shout out to a good friend of mine, Stuart Murray. For any of you Superman fans in the room, my friend has a good YouTube channel, Stu Murray 47, big, huge Superman collector, and he lives in Scotland. So I know I've sent all three of you the few images of some of these actual locations that are in this book. So anytime I have an excuse to tell Stu, like, hey, I'm reading a book that mentions Scotland. Is this a real place? Is this a real place? He's like, please knock it off, Rob. I don't do that to you in Ohio. Like, ooh, is this the Ohio River? Ooh, is this the Ohio River? So he graciously sent a couple pictures of some of the locales. He's like, oh, hey, I was at this castle. Oh, hey, this is the top of one of the highest spots in Edinburgh. And then he started going, whoa, that would be a really good place to release a disease. Oh, holy crap. Is anybody watching up there? What did you guys think of, first of all, let's go through the art of this book before we get in to some of the story beats. Me personally, if I've read something, that's really weird, or read something with Taylor's artwork in it, it's not sticking to me right at the moment. This is probably, for me, I think, weakness is the wrong word. I didn't connect with the art as well, but that's not saying that it's horrible. I think with just some of the other issues we've had, it's kind of drawn me in a little more. What did you guys think of the art in this book? Let's start with Terence.
So Alan Grant is from Scotland, and I think Dave Taylor is either from the UK or Scotland, because I think they did a lot of that Judge Dredd stuff together. Yeah. And actually, I went to Scotland way back in 2001 and actually got to go to Edinburgh and go to this castle and stuff like that. So for me, it was kind of cool to kind of see some of the stuff and think, like, is that what I remember? Because it's been a while now. It's almost 20 years. And then I even dug out some of my old photos, because it was before I had a digital camera back in 2001, and was looking at some of them. I think the art is serviceable. I think it doesn't jump out to me as like, this is amazing, this is unbelievable, but it also doesn't, I'm never taken out of the story because of the art, except for one moment when Batman like surfboards on a sign downstairs, and
that he pulled a Legolas before Legolas did.
Yeah. Other than that, and even that wasn't too bad. I think the art shines best actually when they are doing, or when the artist is showing the faces of some of the Scottish people. Like on page 9, there's a panel of the three guys who are trying to rob the castle, and just the line work and stuff in their faces, and how each face is kind of a little unique, I thought was the best part of this book. His Batman is a little generic for me, but it's not horrible, but it's not anything where I'm going to remember it. So hopefully that makes sense.
Michael.
He relies heavily on Batman as a shape when drawing the character. He you see the costume here and there, but he relies a lot on the cowl and the cape and shadows and Shadow of the Bat. I said the name of the show too. I think where it excels is in like the normal people.
Yeah.
These look like real people. They don't look like, like the CW cast that you could sometimes get in these books. I think my favorite image is Bruce Wayne standing there with a towel around his waist, holding the bat, the cape in the hotel room, and it's just like he just got a shower. Because I gotta agree with my co-host over on Overlook Dark Knight, that costume must stink by the end of the night.
Yeah,
like the amount of sweating he probably does. And I guess you could make the argument that, like, Grant Morrison says he does some kind of breathing exercise, which keeps he doesn't perspire because of it,
But he hangs out in a sewer a lot, too. He's in sewer and getting, Killer Croc sweat on him and all kinds of stuff, yeah.
Laughing gas.
Yeah.
See, that's one of those situations where slash fiction, real book, getting Killer Croc sweat on him is the joke that isn't funny. If you have to explain it, it's not funny.
See, now every point that's made, I want Ryan to explain how it was an editorial decision in Denny O'Neill's voice. He's got to go to a laundromat to get it fixed, whatever. Yeah.
But seeing him, surf down the stairs on that door, I have to imagine that, Joel Schumacher saw this and go, how I can do this better?
Yeah.
Is I can have him surfing
jumping
on the door
out of a plane
of a rocket. Yeah. And that's as somebody who actually enjoys Batman and Robin unironically.
It took the
re-releases, the
re-releases
yeah.
that I think I was the only one in the theater for Batman and Robin, and I had a rip-roaring time with that movie. I'm like, I think it's just one of those, like, fine wine. Talking about Stella, that's her favorite Batman movie, which I think we need to re-examine that, but I respect it at the same
Every
time.
time she says that, I'm like, Stella, you really need to look inside.
Right. So, Ryan, what did you think of the art in this book?
I think it's the same artist that was on the previous issue of Shadow of the Bat that leads into this one, right?
I think so. Now that I put my foot in my mouth, I said, I don't think I really read much, and I started to scroll through stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, you mean the previous issue, moron?
Yeah. So there is the continuity there, which I think is pretty good. And you talk about the Batman being in shadow. I think that's cool. Like, there's that on page 6 of this book. Batman sitting in the doorway, and it actually looks it's really Affleck-like to me. It reminded me of the scene at the end of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition, where he's standing in the jail cell before he gets Lex Luthor. It's just that silhouette where he's got this hulking figure. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I did just find out that the cover artist Carl Critchlow is in fact a Magic the Gathering card illustrator. He has illustrated many Magic cards since going all the way back from 1997, and he still is making Magic cards today. So there is a very legitimate reason why I made that association. So
if Batman's a Magic card, is he like the Magic card that comes in?
He's like a planeswalker.
Feed him.
He's like a planeswalker. He comes in, he's got like a bunch of different abilities, and it's going to take you have to have a whole bunch of creatures out to be able to even begin to tick those counters down.
A world I know nothing about, but what you said makes
it's a rabbit hole.
Sense. Yeah. One of my favorite panels, and it's weird. It's page, if I can pull this thing apart, page 18. It's the black on black version of Batman where he's coming at screen going vermin. I don't know if it's a weird coloring error, probably not a coloring error, but trying to offset Batman so you can kind of tell that he's there. But just these ominous hands, the bottom part of the cowl, you can kind of tell that it's there. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite panel, but there's just something about the coloring of that panel I like quite a bit. This is probably the most story for Legacy and the virus that's going on, where we actually are starting to get to Racious plans that they're going to Paris and they're going to Scotland and Edinburgh, specifically where you've got Batman jumping off the side of the cliff and then putting the virus down in his belt before he hits the water. And something I thought was interesting that Grant did is add the real people, if you will, the citizens and these other people that are coming back to steal the tombstone. It's getting late, folks.
Doomstone.
That they become basically the savior of the story. Like, Batman's doing all of the work here, but the reluctant, ride along. Like, Batman really doesn't want him there, but is using them. And at first I thought this was going to be a weird, like, gimmick. Like, I don't see Batman riding around in a van down by the river.
It's pretty badass. It's like a weird Scooby-Doo, like, kind of deal, where it's like they're in a van and Batman's in a van. I gotta team up with these people just because I need to get to my... He's using it is actually a very Batman thing to do when you think about it, because he's using the environment and the resources he has at hand to get the job done in a place that is not Gotham,
Yeah. And I just because you mentioned BVS, I'm thinking of the Justice League, where Gordon says, "Oh, I see you playing with others again." And Affleck's like, "Temporarily," or whatever.
Maybe temporary.
Like, yeah. That I can hear Affleck's voice in this. Like, I can't believe I'm running around with these guys. Like, all right, we're not cutting jokes here or anything. Just to see Batman in a van it shouldn't be funny, but at the same time,
it's funny as hell.
Yeah.
My name is Bruce Wayne.
And talk about that.
My parents were killed when I was a child, and I live in a cave 14 miles from Gotham.
I mean, he basically should have said that. They were asking, because when he gets in the van, they're like, "Well, who are you supposed to be?" But he says, "The Batman. I'm American." He's like, "Who are you, by the way?" He should have we got into more explanation, but like, "I became a bat after my parents got killed. You'll never know because blah blah blah. You're in Scotland." Talking about this, I thought it was really. I'll just put some comparisons out there for y'all. So it was really fun to jump into this issue because it's one of the few in Legacy, right? That's not a Chuck Dixon show. Like, you kind of take this... I'm not going to say it's a detour because it's following sequentially in the story, but as soon as you know that it's not Dixon, you kind of, mentally know, like, okay, we're going into something different, because you can tell right away it's a different writer, right? Which is not a bad thing, because like I just said with the Robin issue, you're picking up with a different character, so you're used to it. But what is really interesting is that some of the dialogue choices that Bruce and Batman uses in this are something that I don't think Dixon ever would have his Batman say or do, which I think is really funny. Because things like when you get Batman suddenly has this inner monologue and he's sliding down, in the church with the door, and he says things like, "Life means nothing to them, not even their own. He daren't let this one escape, and he daren't allow himself to think about how the pigs are faring with the other." Like, I don't think Batman would say daren't. And then on the next page where he's like, "Poison, blast," like, I don't think Batman would talk like that exactly. Or, I mean, he would. And he would in another issue that this issue made me think of almost immediately when I was reading this. And that issue is a Dennis O'Neil throwback as well. If you go back and look up The Brave and the Bold issue number 93, which is a team-up with Batman and the House of Mystery, which it's a very deep pull, and I covered that, and I podcasted about this book on a Halloween episode of the Batman Book Club. Shout out to the Batman Book Club podcast. You can go back and listen to that. So that whole issue is like Batman in, is it Scotland? I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but it's Batman that's like not in Gotham, and he's works with villagers, or these villagers are telling him stories about this haunted house and stuff like that. And Batman has some quirky dialogue, like he has really quirky dialogue, and Gordon forces him to go on this boat trip, and then Bruce tries to like throw his costume overboard the ship So, because he's like, I don't want to be Batman. I've got to be Bruce Wayne through this trip or whatever. And then, like, a mysterious ghost brings the suit back. It's goofy as hell, but it's fun. And this issue reminds me of, it's almost like a weird sister, like, spiritual successor to it almost. Like, so do yourself a favor and go back and look up it's on DC Universe, I believe, Brave and the Bold number 93, and of course it's Denny O'Neil, and like we've said, a lot of the other parts of Legacy feel like an updated Denny O'Neil thing with just being in the desert and Ra's al Ghul, and you're not in Gotham and stuff. But that's another example, deep pull example that I now that it's been a few years and I've read more comics, that I'm noticing these connections in.
So one of the last things I kind of want to leave off here before we wrap this Dog and Pony show up here is that we're ending on, which I think this is something I didn't say earlier, that I never think of my supervillains or superheroes buying plane tickets to go travel to other places. I don't know if I always think, they got their own private jet. So Tim is relaying the message to Bruce that Oracle found another plane ticket where Ra's and his men are probably traveling to, not probably, but they're going to Calcutta. Then Bruce is like, that's my next stop. So I don't know if that was just a weird little thing that I'm hung up on of like, what are heroes and villains don't buy plane tickets? Like, you would think one of the top villains in the world that has lived a millennia, you're going to get nabbed and caught by,
by the TSA.
Well, and Rob, we didn't bring it up, but now that you brought it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot to talk about that. How funny was it in the Catwoman episode where they are flying on the plane and you don't realize it? Like, it's Dick is like getting medical attention from Alfred, and he's talking to Tim, and then they flash to the cockpit, and it's Batman flying the plane
without the shirt. I'm like,
no
he doesn't,
shirt on, but he's still got the cowl and gloves. Yeah, and then he's like, you need to rest. He's like, I'll rest when Roz is captured and the madness is finished.
And that is also when I will put a shirt on.
Exactly. Like, he can't wear a shirt.
As long as I'm in the desert, the shirt's off.
Yeah. That was hilarious.
Yeah.
There was a Brave and the Bold issue, another Brave and the Bold issue. I think it was the one where he teamed up with Richard Dragon, where Batman flew coach.
Oh, no.
It's the funniest thing I have ever seen. It's a Jim Aparo drawing of Batman sitting in coach.
Not Bruce Wayne, but Batman.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And not just Batman sitting in coach by himself, but I'm assuming with a plane full of passengers.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm writing that down. I need to go check it out. Hey, it's Jim Aparo and Batman and coach. What's not to love, right? An innocent time. Well, any final thoughts for this issue in particular, and then from what we've read as a whole? Let's start with our guest, Michael Bailey.
I think Legacy is a much quieter story compared to Contagion, which it is ostensibly following up. Even though a lot of action-y stuff happens, Contagion was more of, we've got to find a cure or all these people are going to die. This one has a little more scope to it. So because of that, it has a... I know quieter doesn't really describe it, but that's the word that keeps popping up in my head. The fact that we took an entire issue for Batman to go sightseeing in Edinburgh, and I don't know, when I saw that tour guide, I was just like, am I hearing the woman from Brave? Like, is that the voice? Or is it like is it going to be like Amy Pond? I'm okay with that too. There's also a random point in this issue where they pass a couple of tourists that look like they're here from Preacher. Just in the way Dave Hunt draws, or Dave Taylor draws them. But no, it's just like you had a story that kind of sort of ties into it, but it's more of Catwoman's thing. You have a definite rollicking good time of Tim and Dick fighting in Paris. And then you have Batman sightseeing and hanging out with a university professor and two guys that own a decor business that just show up cosplaying, and it's the best thing ever. I loved these books. They were so much fun to read.
Terence.
All right, so I had to look it up while you were talking. It appeared in Brave and the Bold 132 when Batman teams up with someone I've never heard of, but it's one of these stereotypical Caucasian karate people, Richard Dragon, the Kung Fu fighter, and it has it. I'm looking at the panel of Batman and Kung Fu fighter in costume flying in coach. It's hilarious, and like the stewardess is pushing the cart. So yeah, you guys got to check that out. And as for these issues, yeah, I mean, what more can we say? We've been talking for like 2 hours about them, and I'm kind of tapped out a little bit of what to say other than these 90s comics, I know for me a huge part of it is nostalgia, but they are just so much fun, and they're just so much fun to read. I don't know how much of that's me remembering back to when I was reading these, in my, late teens, early 20s, and how much of it is it was just like a golden age of these stories before things kind of, got all rebooted, New 52 kind of thing. Yep.
Ryan.
I liked it. Like I said, go back and if you read that Brave and the Bold issue, this feels very similar, where it's like Batman's solving a mystery, and it's kind of supernatural, but at the same time, it's also furthering the story of Legacy. It is kind of a, if there was it's like a Nightfall thing, right? If there was like a novel written about Legacy turned into a novel, this and like the Catwoman issue, there's things that would be taken out or streamlined or whatever, but it's fun. It's cool. It's fun to see Batman in situations and locations he isn't usually in, and seeing him make of it what he will, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. And but yeah, so like I'm excited to see. And just I'll tell you what, the amount of times reading this issue, I had to look up what does this mean? How do I pronounce this? Right. what translate Siri, translate this. Was a lot. I mean, it's stuff I should have known, but I'm trying to say things phonetically correctly in my head so the characters sound more smarter. So that's what I'm trying to do in this international swashbuckling story. So I'm excited to get to keep on with this and remember how this whole thing ends, and I think it's going to get really interesting.
Yeah. And I think this, like Michael had said earlier, Contagion was, I wouldn't say at a breakneck speed, every issue was oh my gosh, somebody's going to die. Oh my gosh, somebody's going to die. I think the refreshing thing with Legacy so far that Dixon is writing the lion's share of this. Mm-hmm. He's giving time and moments to breathe where, Bruce can go sightseeing and then hang out with the ex-Scooby-Doo gang that didn't quite get to make the TV show. These are the, the rejects for Shaggy, if you will. But getting that moment to kind of let the story breathe a little bit more, and by the time you get to the tail end of this book, then things really start ramping up. So I really appreciate these 3 issues that we read and we went through, and it makes you just kind of want to look at that next issue with all those muscles with the Kelly Jones cover and go, what is going to happen in this issue? So before we get out of here, I want to give a big thank you to our guest, Michael Bailey. Thank you for coming on to the show, sir. And if people already are not listening to your wonderful shows, where can they find them? And do you have anything on deck that's coming out soon?
FortressOfBaileytude.com. That's where you can find what I laughingly call the Fortress of Baileytude Podcasting Network. It's where I host all the shows that I host or co-host or produce in some capacity. There's From Crisis to Crisis, which should have some new episodes soon. We're hip deep into 1996. We're right around this time of period, actually. Nice. Ironically. So this was some good timing. So I'm dealing with the fact that Lois and Clark have broken up, and it's been a roller coaster ride emotionally. Over on Overlook Dark Knight, which should also have some new episodes soon, we're wrapping up our look at the Jim Starlin run, as my dog starts tapping at my microphone. The Jim Starlin run of Batman, and we're about to do Death in the Family. So, which we've already recorded. It's
yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
and I have some stuff coming out from Views from the Long Box, and it all comes back to Superman. Should be a lot of fun, and thanks for having me on.
All right. Ryan, you got anything to plug before we get out of here for BOF or Azrael podcast, maybe?
Azrael, no, not, it. I'll tell you what, Azrael will come in 2021. I can tell you that, because it's January, and it gives me 11 months to procrastinate. So, but yeah, that's a goal. That's not technically a New Year's resolution. I don't really. My New Year's resolution is a life resolution. It's ongoing, but things are going.
How many episodes do you have in the can right now
of Azrael?
Yeah,
I think we've got like 4 of them done. If you're not counting the Dennis O'Neil interview, which is its own special thing too. So like, how many? Yeah, is it a? Yeah, we'll get there, and it'll be worth it as always. But if you want to follow it and not get updates, it's on Twitter at Azrael Podcast. My personal Twitter is at SMB_Ryan. The SMB, of course, stands for the Super Mario Brothers Movie Archive website, which is on Twitter at SMB Movie. And I hopped into the Iceberg Lounge show.
I know.
On
I want
YouTube.
to say congratulations. I just finished that episode, and I was like, I wonder who's on. Holy crap, that's Ryan Haas.
That's what they all said.
When the heck did that happen?
They all said that too. Like they sent the link out, and now it was that perfect storm time, like this podcast, where it's like, whoa, it's a weekend where I actually have the time to join in on something, so I'm gonna do it. So I popped in and was able to join them on that show. And so if you want to look at me and watch me talk about more stuff like this with some other pals of ours, go to the Straight Outta Gotham YouTube page and watch the latest episode, the January 22nd episode of the Iceberg Lounge. It's just a stream where we discuss all kinds of nerdy stuff. And, it's got Justin Kowalski, Eric Holtzman, and Pete Illustrated, aka Pete Vera, and then Paul Herman even jumps in, and
I saw it. Garrett came in,
and Garrett came in at the end too. It's a pretty epic little episode of the Iceberg Lounge. So if you just want to throw it on the TV while you're doing stuff, it's like a bunch of friends just chatting about all the nerd stuff. So it was a good time. So check that out.
I know I usually ask you, Terence, if you have anything to plug. I think I know your answer, but by the time I don't ask you, you're going to go, hey, I had something.
He does. He's got the YouTube channel stuff.
That's my New Year's resolution is to try to at least get some videos each week, get some videos up there. And check out our YouTube channel, which is just the same as the podcast. Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake.
All right. So on the behalf of our special guest, Michael Bailey, Terence, and Ryan, I'm Rob. You've been listening to the BatmanUniverse.net, and more importantly, you've been listening to Everyone Loves the Drake. We'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care. Thanks for listening to Robin, Everyone Loves the Drake